Hello and welcome to the Daily Politics. Patience Wheatcroft, does this continuation of austerity just show that the policies of that austerity does need to continue, and there wasn't perhaps enough austerity, although you say that was the right recipe at the time, but we still have a substantial deficit?
Exactly, longer than people had expected. So I don't think you can actually blame the previous administration.
The rallying cry.
And we'll be finding out what happened next.
All that in the next hour and a half. With us for the duration, former could you not, Financial Secretary of the Treasury, David Gauke. I just made that bit up. Shadow Transport Secretary, Lillian Greenwood.
Now, yesterday, down in Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia carries out the same atrocities that the government condemns ISIS for, including beheadings and public floggings. In fact, I think they beheaded more people than ISIS have over the last 12 years. Somehow, the Chancellor must work out how to scale the huge challenge of NHS finances, with recent figures showing a record deficit of £930 million racked up by health trusts in England in the first 3 months of the year. Then there's the next month's spending review. The Chancellor is looking for cuts of up to 40% from departmental budgets. But Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond and Work and Pension Secretary Ian Duncan-Smith are amongst those in Cabinet said to be doing battle with Mr Osborne. By the end of the year, the government is likely to make a decision on where to build a new runway. The Chancellor said to favour Heathrow, but the likes of Boris Johnson and Tory London mayoral candidate Zac Goldsmith will be up for a fight on that. And next April, £4.4 billion worth of cuts to tax credits come into effect, with former Chancellor Ken Clarke warning that Mr Osborne will have to get his tin hat on as the criticism mounts. If that wasn't enough, the Chancellor may yet find himself hit by the global economy, with the IMF warning of a brittle, uneven recovery with slower than expected growth and increasing downside risks. Andrew.
Thanks, Joko. David Gauke, Monitor, it regulates all 151 NHS trusts. It says the NHS now is in the worst financial in $1 billion northern cities into dormitories for London business.
Well,
close quote.
I'm not sure that Jeremy it was taken from an early draft.
How could it be wrong?
After a document, Andrew, and that
said that he'd be wrong. If the Guardian, perished the thought, quoted him wrongly, that would be a wrong statement.
Yes, I think we need to make sure that we use HS2, that we use the investment in our rail network to benefit the whole country.
And just for one final thing, are you in favour of a third runway at Heathrow? But neither of you decided.
Well,
it's all right. I mean,
you've only got till Christmas.
We last built a runway in the South East 70 years ago. So, I mean, why would either of you want to run? Both very keen on commissions. Now, what does a pot of goose fat, a set of stamps and a Margaret Thatcher biography have in common? No, it doesn't. They're all presents from Her Majesty's government to foreign dignitaries. But far from showing off the best of British, the Business Minister, Anna Soubry, has...
Well, dear oh dear, Stephen Toole, you certainly did do your duty, both Stephen Toole and viewers. How was that then? The naked truth, bearing all?
It was, everyone should do it once in their lives, Joe. I think, you know, it's...
I might decline, I won't repeat them, but actually, let's see if you can put, you know, your money where your proverbial...
to
sponsor you, I have
at least a fiver.
I did, and I'm going to raise.
Quite a lot by Joe's standards.
I will definitely happening in the wider world of political betting. We're going to take this theme and go a little further with it, but everyone's going to keep their clothes on. Rory Scott from Paddy Power. Rory, thank you very much for that. Very comprehensive. Do you fancy any of those, Stephen Toole?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ground instead of heading.
Oh yeah, where?
Dems, I'd like to put it on out at some. Realise
the last one you gave me, it was at least 4 pages long. I mean, it must have taken you ages.
Quite a lot. Lillian Greenwood, what about the next Labour leadership election? What do you make of that? A 50% chance, they're saying, of Jeremy Corbyn surviving till tests.
Sports, actually.
Thank you.
Just time to put you out of your misery, give you the answer to guess the year. The year was 2001.
The election year.
Press that buzzer. And the winner.
I didn't know.
Is see that.
Richard
Are we out of time now?
We're almost out of time. After all that excitement, I'm afraid I might have to lie down in a darkened room after that particular film.
All right, well, that's it. Shall I say goodbye?
Yes, you better.
I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks to all of our guests. This is on the day in which King Harold was killed in 1066. This very day, October the 14th. Seeing off the French invader, which he lost. 1 o'clock news starting on BBC One. Now I'll be back here at noon tomorrow with another Daily Politics. Bye-bye.
Bye. So will I. Treasury courtyard. Now, they don't have one of these in the real courtyard, but it represents everything the government is due to spend this year, which adds up to £742 billion. And I'm going to start by highlighting a few of the most significant parts of this total annual budget. You can see the £217 billion that goes on social security. That includes everything from job seekers' allowance to the state pension. And there's the £35 billion the UK is due to spend this year in interest on its debt. And George Osborne says that's a figure he's determined to bring down. Now, the focus of today's statement is the money that goes on administering and delivering public services, departmental spending. Here it is. And you can see it's just under half of the total the government spends. Now, we're going to delve into the budgets of a few of the most substantial government departments. Let's start with health, because it's the NHS that accounts for the biggest chunk of this kind of spending. Now, the Chancellor isn't going to find any of his savings here because he's promised to increase NHS funding in England by £10 billion by the next election. The government's also promised a real terms increase in the defence budget every year. That's part of its commitment to meeting the NATO target of spending 2% of GDP on defence of the realm. The government's also committed to spending 0.7% of GDP on overseas aid, meaning that budget is also protected. So the Chancellor's not going to find any of his £20 billion worth of savings he says he needs to make from either health, defence or aid. So where could it come from instead? Well, what about from the education budget, which is a big part of what the state spends on public services? Well, here the Conservatives have promised a cash increase per pupil in schools. That means savings from here will be limited, although the rest of the budget doesn't have any guaranteed protection. Here's the money that goes to English local authorities. This was one of the first departments to agree to big savings in advance of today's statement. The Home Office, on the other hand, took longer to reach a deal over its funding. And the single biggest thing Theresa May's department spends money on is the grant it gives to police forces in England and Wales, although they also get some of their money from other sources, including your local council tax bill. And some of the other departments that are going to have to find big savings over the next 4 years are the departments of business, transport and justice. But let's go back now to that big part of government spending I mentioned earlier, social security. Because, of course, that's where a lot of the focus has been in the weeks and months before this statement. Now, again here, there's plenty the Chancellor won't touch. The state pension is a massive part of the budget. But the government has a long-standing promise not to cut it, along with various pensioner benefits. The other areas of big spending the government has had to look to are housing benefit, disability benefits and incapacity benefits. And you can see that big sum of money, £30 billion, that's due to be spent on personal tax credits this year, an area where the Chancellor's found that making savings can prove tricky. Yes, Andrew, I'm at Grand Central. No, not New York, but as you said, the shiny new shopping centre here in Birmingham. It was opened last week by the Queen. But I'm here really to talk to people about George Osborne's autumn statement and his 5-year spending plans. And first up to talk to us, Ravi Subramanian from Unison and Jonathan Iserby from the Taxpayers Alliance. Welcome to both of you. Yesterday, Ravi, that announcement that extra cash to the NHS will be front-loaded. Welcome news?
Well, Unison...
Thank you both, gentlemen. Well, let's get a little bit more about growing the economy and talk to someone from the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce. We have here Henrietta Brearley. We're talking there just about austerity versus growth. What's more important to businesses here?
it's got to be a mix. We recognise that actually...
All right, Henrietta, thank you very much. One of the things, of course, that will be most important to people here, as they're no doubt starting to think about Christmas shopping, you can see the decorations, and that's people's personal finances and their financial security. So who better to talk to than our personal finance expert, Annie Shaw. One of the main things that people were worried about were cuts to tax credits. George Osborne ran into big problems with those plans, and there's every expectation he's going to soften that in some way. If he does, where else could he get his savings? This is the big... Annie, and we'll be talking to you throughout the programme. Now, if you have any questions you'd like to put to Annie or me or any of our guests here, or any stories, in fact, if you're here in Birmingham, you can email us at haveyoursay@bbc.co.uk. You can tweet us at @BBC_haveyoursay, or you can text us on 61124. Too much for me to remember without the handy iPad. Andrew. Yes, Andrew, so much to chew over. Digest after that autumn statement and spending review, and the improved state of the public finances given George Osborne a little more wriggle room. Hence, he announced that he was going to not go ahead with some big planned cuts on things like tax credits. He wants to be known as the building chancellor, not just the cutting chancellor. And with that in mind, my guest here, the Conservative leader of Solihull Council, Bob Slay. He's heralded, of course, the Northern Powerhouse. Now we have the Midlands engine. Is it good as it's out? Of course, for shoppers here, just weeks before Christmas, they'll be thinking about the money in their back pocket and how it's going to affect their personal finances. One of the big announcements was also about the state pension, and with us is our personal finance expert, Annie Shaw. Tell us about people's now pensions. It's going to go up.
Well, it is going to...
Leave it. Yes, Andrew, I'm in the city the Chancellor calls the Midlands engine in Birmingham. So, did the Chancellor's figures add up? It's all about the numbers in terms of driving forward a city like Birmingham. Well, he said he's going to be able to eliminate the deficit and still have a £10 billion surplus at the end of this Parliament. So, Jonathan Isserby from the Taxpayers Alliance, do his figures add up?
Well, I think a lot of us are going to spend the next few hours and perhaps overnight looking over the detail of the figures, because obviously the devil is often in the detail. We certainly welcome his commitment.
Wouldn't it be better to spend it on public services rather than pay down the deficit at this point in the parliamentary cycle?
There are clearly certain...
In your mind, a bit of a missed opportunity, but there will be those who will welcome things like his announcement that he wasn't going to go ahead with the cuts to tax credits, or certainly not yet, and that there was more money going into health. Let's speak to Ravi Subramanian from the health union Unison. Just talked there to the Taxpayers Alliance. They say it was a missed opportunity. Should have used the money to pay down the deficit.
Well, I think it's a missed opportunity from George Osborne to actually properly fund our NHS.
How much is required? I mean, in your mind, we often hear about there being a winter crisis. It hasn't happened in quite the way that's been predicted in previous years, thank goodness. And we also hear that more money needs to be put in. How much, realistically, do you want to see?
Well, the problem has been it's A&E. And if we get a cold snap this winter, there's going to be an increase in trips and falls, and I think we're going to see a real problem in A&E.
All right, Ravi, thank you very much. Well, of course, George Osborne didn't want to just be known as the cutting chancellor, and today, to some extent, actually showed that. Let's talk to a business, a very successful business here in Birmingham, an interiors business run by Rob Bruton. Thank you very much for coming on to the programme. The house building programme that George Osborne was boasting about, really, today, that will be good news for you. Thank you very much. And with that, it's back to you, Andrew.
Government plans.
Andrew, as part of his government's housing plans, David Cameron has pledged to demolish and rebuild England's worst housing estates. A total of £140 million will be made available to community groups, councils and housing associations for the scheme, which would see 100 housing estates demolished and regenerated. The Prime Minister says he wants to rebuild houses people feel they can have a future in. More broadly, the government's housing bill, which covers England and Wales, aims to transform generation rent into generation buy. The bill includes plans for so-called starter homes for first-time buyers under the age of 40. These starter homes will be available at 80% of the open market value, and their price will be capped at £250,000 outside London or £450,000 inside the capital. Now, despite Mr Cameron's rhetoric, home ownership in England has actually fallen under two-thirds since he's been Prime Minister, down from 66% in 2010-11 to 63% in 2013-14. The government's plans on housing were the subject of some heated exchanges between David Cameron and Jeremy Corbyn at PMQs yesterday.